They say blood is thicker than water. But in my family, blood was nothing more than a contract written in disappearing ink. My name is Harper Hayes. For as long as I can remember, my life was defined by a single, crushing shadow, the shadow of my father, Arthur Hayes, and his golden child daughter, my younger sister Chloe, to my father, a ruthless businessman who measured human worth solely by bank accounts and social status. I was always the disappointment. I wasn't elegant like Chloe. I didn't major in corporate law or marry into a high society family. Instead, the day I turned 18, I joined the military. I still remember the sneer on my father's face when I told him I had enlisted. He looked at me with pure disgust, completely dismissing my choice. To him, I wasn't serving my country. I was just running away because I didn't have what it took to survive in his elite world. Over the years, whenever I visited home, the treatment never changed. I was invisible. If I tried to speak during dinner, my father would cut me off. Turning his attention back to Chloe, praising her latest shopping trip or her connections, I learned to keep my head down, wear my uniform with quiet pride, and accept that I would never be the daughter he wanted. But then, our grandfather passed away. Grandfather was the only person who truly saw me. He loved my quiet discipline and my dedication to a higher purpose. When his will was read, it sent shockwaves through the family. He had bypassed my father entirely, leaving his entire $12 million estate and inheritance directly to me. The moment the announcement was made, the fragile peace in our family completely shattered. My father's indifference instantly turned into a cold, calculating rage. He couldn't accept that the daughter he despised was now holding the keys to the family fortune. He immediately demanded I sign the inheritance over to him and Chloe, claiming I was incapable of managing such wealth. When I quietly refused, his eyes turned ice. He told me he would destroy me. That brings us to that fateful morning in federal court. I walked into that massive, imposing courtroom completely alone. I wore a simple, dark civilian suit, keeping my head high despite the heavy silence of the room. On the other side of the aisle sat my father and Chloe, looking untouchable. They hadn't just brought themselves, they had hired one of the most ruthless, high-powered corporate attorneys in the state. As the judge took his seat, my father leaned over to his lawyer, his voice cutting through the quiet courtroom, just loud enough for me to hear. He pointed a finger at me, a cruel, mocking smile on his lips. "Don't worry about her," he whispered loudly. "My daughter is just a grunt. She has no power here." But what my father didn't know that day was that his words were about to cost him everything. He thought he was playing a game against a helpless soldier. He had no idea who he was actually dealing with. The legal battle began, and it quickly became a masterclass in cruelty. My father's high-priced attorney stood before the judge and began to dismantle my entire existence. They didn't just argue about the legal language of the will. They targeted my character, my mental health, and my dignity. They presented fabricated psychological assessments, twisted stories from my past, and even brought forward old, bitter acquaintances who were paid to lie under oath. They painted a picture of me as an unstable, erratic, and deeply manipulative young woman who had taken advantage of a frail old man in his final days. Every single lie felt like a physical blow to my chest. I sat at my table, watching my own flesh and blood, the man who had watched me take my first steps, nodding along with a look of theatrical sorrow on his face. He actually pretended to be a heartbroken father who was simply trying to protect his unstable daughter from herself. Behind him, Chloe sat gracefully, checking her reflection in her compact mirror, utterly unbothered by the destruction of my reputation. The sheer weight of the betrayal was suffocating. I felt completely broken, shattered by the reality that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally were willing to utterly destroy my soul just to get their hands on $12 million. For a fleeting moment, the old feelings of worthlessness tried to take over. I felt tiny, trapped in a room full of powerful predators. But then, my father took the witness stand to testify against me. He looked at the judge, his voice trembling with a flawless, fake emotion. "Your Honor," he said, wiping away a non-existent tear. It pains my heart to say this, but my daughter Harper has always lacked the intellectual capacity and emotional stability to handle reality, let alone a multi-million-dollar estate. She is financially illiterate, easily manipulated, and deeply unwell. Leaving this money in her hands is not what my father wanted. It belongs with us, the ones who actually know how to manage a legacy. Hearing those words echo through the microphone did something to me. The heartbreak and the sorrow inside me suddenly burned away, replaced by a cold, unwavering strength. I looked down at my hands, remembering the years of intense study, the grueling late-night hours, and the immense legal responsibilities I had quietly carried on my shoulders. Far away from this toxic house, I had allowed my family to treat me like a shadow for my entire life because I loved them. But looking at them now, using perjury and deceit to legally rob me, I realized they didn't deserve my love, and they certainly didn't deserve my silence anymore, until everything changed in a single fraction of a second. The judge turned his eyes toward my table, his expression incredibly grave. "Ms. Harper," the judge stated, "your father's counsel has presented very serious claims regarding your competence. Do you have any legal representation present, or any evidence to counter these heavy allegations?" I stood up slowly, smoothing down my blazer, my heart beating in a calm, steady rhythm. The entire courtroom fell dead silent. My father leaned back in the witness box, crossing his arms, fully expecting me to burst into tears or beg for a settlement. Chloe didn't even look up from her phone. They thought the trap had closed. I looked the judge directly in the eye, my voice ringing out with absolute, undeniable authority. "Yes, Your Honor, I do have representation. I will be representing myself, and I would like to submit my official credentials into evidence." I opened my briefcase, pulled out a sealed, certified federal folder, and walked it directly over to the bailiff. "For the record," I announced, my voice cutting through the heavy air like a razor, "I am not a civilian seeking legal counsel. I am a fully licensed active-duty prosecutor specializing in federal fraud, currently serving within the higher ranks of the legal system." The silence that followed was deafening. I turned around just in time to watch the color completely drain from my father's face. His crossed arms dropped instantly to his sides. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The high-powered attorney he had hired froze mid, his eyes widening in absolute panic as he stared at the official seals on the documents being handed to the judge. Chloe's phone slipped from her fingers, clattering loudly against the wooden floor. The judge thoroughly reviewed the papers, a look of profound respect crossing his face. "The record will reflect," the judge announced, "that the defendant is a highly distinguished legal expert. These credentials are fully valid. For years, I had kept my specific career and my promotions completely private from my family. They never asked about my life, so I never told them. In their extreme arrogance, they assumed that because I didn't work for my father's company, I was doing nothing of value. They had no idea that while they were busy spending money and looking down on me, I was prosecuting complex corporate crimes and running circles around lawyers twice their attorney's age. The tables hadn't just turned. I took total control of the courtroom. With the precision of a trained prosecutor, I systematically dismantled their entire case piece by piece. I presented ironclad digital evidence proving that the psychological evaluations they submitted were completely fraudulent, tracing the digital footprint back to a corrupt doctor my father had personally wired $50,000 to just last month. I then submitted financial records exposing my father's hidden debts, proving that his own corporate empire was on the brink of total collapse, which was the real, desperate reason they needed my grandfather's millions. By the time I finished presenting my closing arguments, my father's expensive lawyer looked like a ghost. The judge looked down at my father with absolute burning disgust. The case was dismissed with prejudice, ensuring they could never touch a single cent of the inheritance. Furthermore, the judge ordered an immediate federal investigation into my father for perjury, bribery, and document forgery. As the court adjourned, I calmly packed my files. My father stumbled toward my table, his hands shaking, his voice stripped of every ounce of pride. "Harper, please," he stammered, looking at me with actual terror. "We are family. We can fix this outside of court." I snapped my briefcase shut, looked him in the eyes, and felt nothing but a deep, beautiful peace. "You wanted to find out who was competent enough to run a legacy, Dad," I said quietly. "Now you know." I walked out of that courthouse into the warm afternoon sun, leaving them to face the ruins of their own greed. I learned a vital lesson through that pain. Your worth is never defined by the people who fail to appreciate you, even if they share your blood. Real strength doesn't require shouting or stepping on others. It is about knowing exactly who you are, standing your ground with dignity, and trusting that the truth will always have the final, loudest word.